All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Conversations on Retail. I can't say that it's a beautiful day in Northwest Arkansas as I usually do, but it's a day. It's a normal fall day in Northwest Arkansas. We're so glad that you're here. Our good friend Steve Blair continues his series on leadership and culture. And today's conversation is about enhancing collaboration between leaders and direct reports. What an honor and a privilege it is for us to welcome our three guests today. Dr. George Graen, LMX Team Leadership, Dr. Robert Roncksa, University of Central Florida, and our good friend, familiar to many of you, Mike Graen with Collaboration LLC. Just a couple of housekeeping issues before we get started. I want to thank our sponsors, West Rock Coffee and Cameron Smith and Associates, have been great sponsors of this group and of this series. We're so grateful for their support. And then the second thing is we hope that those of you who are joining live, this is intended to be a conversation and not a presentation, and we would love for you to be a part of the conversation. You can do that simply by clicking on the Q&A button at any point and submitting your questions, your comments, offering insight, even pushing back if some of your experiences might be inconsistent with what some of the panelists are sharing. So, Steve, with that, thank you so much for being here and for leading this conversation. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Matt. I really appreciate that. It is good to be back. I say this is episode number 10, by the way, of our series. And I say every time I'm excited for the guests that we have with us. And I can say that times 4 today or times 3. Sometimes we have thought leaders on for our conversations on leadership and culture. Sometimes we have practitioners on to talk about our leadership and culture topics. And today, we figured why not do both? And in fact, let's do both. And then let's add in a great friend and mentor, Mike Graen, just for good measure, who's also a thought leader and a practitioner in the area of leadership. So I am excited to be here today. On one hand, we have a leader who has spent over 8 years of his life underwater, leading men and women in service, leading our country, and leading teams in that environment. That's on one hand, 8 years of a life underwater. We also have a researcher, an expert, an author, a teacher of over 70 years of experience, passionately researching what leadership is all about, and specifically the relationship between leaders and their direct reports. So 8 years underwater, 70 years in the trenches, writing, researching, leading, and asking thought-provoking questions. And then we've got my friend Mike Graen, who has been a mentor and leader for hundreds of people across Procter & Gamble, Walmart, all the places that Mike has had an impact. And so, my goodness, if we're going to have a conversation about leadership and relationships with direct reports, what a group we've got facilitated here today. So I'm very excited. For me personally, I have come out of a season of my career where I've been leading teams, and now I am in a season of helping small companies and founders scale their people, operations, and their culture. And a huge part of that is leadership and how you develop the people in the organization. It's interesting. Some of the best seasons of my career have been because they were the best because of the intentionality and authenticity I put into the relationships with the people that I am lucky enough and blessed enough to lead. Some of the darkest seasons of my career, as I look back, are because I didn't do that well. I either didn't do it at all, certainly not intentionally, or I just didn't do it well. It missed the mark. And so this is a very important topic for me personally. I know it's an important topic for the people we have on the call for the reasons we've talked about. So I'm excited to welcome Dr. Graen, Navy Bob, and Mike Graen to the call. You guys want to take a minute and just let's make it a challenge. Take 45 seconds and tell us a little about you that I didn't share. Dr. Navy Bob, how about you go first?
Absolutely, Steve. It is just an honor and pleasure to be here to be on the same stage as Dr. Graen. And so, as you said, 8 years underwater. I just wanted to, it's not consecutively. And so I tallied up my 28-year Navy career, and it's been 8 years underwater. And it's, and again, I'm sure you've seen the movie Hunt for Red October. That's what I did for 28 years. So I was the captain of the USS Texas. I was the Commodore of Submarine Squadron 7 in charge of 10 nuclear fast attack submarines. I also carried the nuclear codes, also known as the nuclear football, for the 43rd president, President Bush. And then I transitioned over to healthcare, where I was embedded in the clinical safety from my background experience from the nuclear Navy and their supreme safety record. And so I don't know anyone else of my background and my tenure in the nuclear Navy that has been embedded in the healthcare clinical safety setting for 5 years. And I'm saying that because I think it's important when I'm going to talk about the LMX going forward. And then while I was there, I received my doctorate at Rollins College in Business Administration. That's where I got exposed to this incredible LMX relationship-based theory. And that's where I met Dr. Graen. And it really was finding like the Dead Sea Scrolls. And it just spread the light on why it was so effective in leadership. And then I am now an adjunct professor at UCF, where I teach leadership, policy and safety and operations management to a master's in healthcare administration. And now I'm the senior vice president as well for the Florida Chamber, State Chamber, where we're leading the first ever business-led statewide mental health initiative across Florida to make Florida the safest, most sustainable, and healthiest state in our great country. And so that's my background. Turn it over to you, Mike.
I think there were about 7 or 8 things in that list that I can say the first time on our Conversations on Leadership and Culture podcast. So thank you, Navy Bob. Dr. Graen, how about a little bit about your?
Well, as you say, 70 years studying leadership. I got hooked on leadership in elementary school because the teacher said you need to report on the great Alexander and his sidekick. And so I did, and I said, wow, I mean, this is just a wonderful relationship between these two people. I mean, it goes way beyond any sort of economics or material kinds of things, and it goes to a firm belief in each other's loyalty and dependability, support, and friendship. And that, to me, is the leadership that we're talking about. It's a relationship, and it's not a leader doing everything from the top or the member doing everything from the bottom. It's working together in that kind of relationship. And what we find is that the millennial generation was actually burnt out by lack of this leadership. They could not find this relationship, so they couldn't think for themselves. They couldn't do what they wanted to do, to make a difference. As they were told in colleges, all education is your role and purpose is to make a difference and help people in any way you can, but make a difference. And they get in the organization, and the organization says, yeah, that's what we're going to do. But when it doesn't happen over almost 2 years, statistics show they just leave and go home without a job and live with their parents. And they have the least participation rate in history. They're just not there. They don't go to the labor force. And now we're doing the same thing to the millennials who were educated in exactly the same way, and we're getting the same kind of results. They're they're setting records for burnout and leaving the organization. And it's all due to the lack of the LMX theory that I've published and talked about, how they were burning out people because you promise them one thing and you don't deliver. So that's where I've been.
I love it. I love it. And that passion is clear. He talks about published 70 years in academia. You publish a lot of things. I got to know Dr. Graen by reading this book, The Intelligent Startup, that features the LMX theory, which I'm sure we'll get into in a second. Mike, go ahead, Mike, and get us kicked off with a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be even on this panel. I hear the two folks that have gone in front of me, and I don't even want to try and introduce myself because I feel like a little flea in the circus here. But my name is Mike Graen. I am the proud son of Dr. George Graen, who is on this podcast as well. I got my degree from the University of Cincinnati, both the bachelor's degree and master's degree. Spent 25 years with Procter & Gamble, and about probably 10 of those working with my good friend Steve Blair on the Walmart Global Customer Team down in Northwest Arkansas. I then left Procter & Gamble, went to Walmart, was responsible for a lot of their work on Retail Link and radio frequency identification and other technologies like that. I did that for about 15 years, and now I'm an independent consultant with working with a lot of different retailers on making sure their stuff is available on the shelf. So I've gone from managing nobody to managing literally 150 people to now I'm back to managing nobody again. So I can tell you there are pros and cons to both of them, but I'm excited for this conversation about leadership.
Yeah, totally got it for sure. Dr. Graen, you have, I believe you have defined leadership as the action of leading a group of people or an organization. What role do you think that leaders and direct reports take in that engagement, in that overall leadership role? What's the role of the two people, the leader and the direct report?
Well, they have to recognize, first of all, that they have the opportunity to develop what I call a leadership relationship between Alexander and his sidekick. And what we've got is we can identify those people that have that ability, and we need to train them and put them together with leaders that have the same kind of ability. And then those two will, if they develop leadership relationship where they trust each other and everything that they say and do is going to be between those two and not go any further, then leadership is possible. And we find that they do, and the real result of that is they can think for themselves. They don't have to expose their crazy first ideas. They can get them developed between the two and tested, and before they become public. They're not going to be leaked or anything like that. And so we find great increase in creativity, eventually new ideas, and ultimately in innovation, new products and services that don't exist at the moment. And they can be invented if these two people work together and stay on course and develop it. It's like the electric computer search people just recently who tried the theory and it worked. That they let people have the opportunity to really think for themselves and to do and to innovate. And they created 4 of the largest search engines in the world. and there 3 of them are in the United States. But then when they got a little bigger, they reverted to type, and the creativity, leadership just disappeared. They would do this, hire these people, engineers, all sorts of technical people out of school, and say they're going to have an opportunity to really make a difference. And after 2 years, with no difference, they just give up, they burn out, and they leave. And
it's pretty remarkable what can happen.
Is don't do this. Keep your word and go through and create more leadership relationships in organizations. We know how to do it, but they just ignore it.
It is pretty remarkable what can happen when you watch it happen well. Like when you see the direct report responding to the leader's coaching and direction, and when the leader responds to the direct report's needs and desires, and then you get those 2 things working at the same time. Dr. Roncksa, my apologies, Dr. Navy Bob, you've spent lots of time with hundreds, probably thousands of people in a very dedicated small space that's a different way of coming to the office and getting to go home at night. Tell us how the leader direct report relationship dynamic played out for you in your career with leading those kinds of teams in that kind of scenario.
Yeah, well, thank you, Steve. And so when I'll give you one analogy, is that I took over one of the worst performing ships in the fleet. And I was tired of playing whack-a-mole and just putting out the fires of, fixing this deficiency. I stopped, and I didn't know I was following this LMX framework until later. And I started really concentrating on the relationships of the crew, of caring, loving them, and going forth. In a short period of time, this ship turned around in a year and a half to be the best submarine of 10 that was graded. It was given an award to be the best submarine in the squadron. We had the highest retention and lowest attrition in the Pacific Fleet for 2 years in a row, and we scored the highest grade possible on the most rigorous nuclear engineering exam. And it wasn't because I was the smartest, the best tactical, it was because I put my efforts in my crew and the relationships building with that, and the outcomes go for it. And I think it's really important to understand this, that when I used to ride, I almost rode every single submarine in the fleet. And you talk about one of the most homogeneous environments of the nuclear Navy, right? We know exactly the tactical and technical rating of each ship. And so it's kind of balanced out. And there were some submarines that were just knocking it out of the park. As it felt everything was clicking. They were safe. They were so wonderfully proficient and successful. And then some submarines, you walk across the pier and it was falling apart. It was unsafe. And I started questioning, like, well, what is the difference? They got the same crew, the same. And it was about the love and the relationships that were built by the commanding officers. And then I transitioned to healthcare, and it was exactly the same. Some units I went on, it was like, where do I sign up? I want to join this team. And then you go on some units, and it was like, this is unsafe. I would not want any of my family being cared for on this unit. And then I got really embedded with LMX when I started doing my doctoral research. Dr. Graen doesn't give himself, enough credit. In the leadership books that I'm teaching now, his name is talking about his profound leadership theory. And there's meta-analysis after meta-analysis. If you concentrate on the leadership and the relationships first, success will follow, outcomes will increase. And Mr. Rogers, the famous neighborhoods, he has a famous quote that I live by, and it really depicts what his theory tells you about. He says, love and then success. It's that hard, but it has to be in that order. We have CEOs, corporations, that they think that the reason why they're in business is to make money. It is not. And when they look for success first, the wheels start to fall off. It is that simple. Your bottom line will go up exponentially if you concentrate on the people first. And so that's where I'd love to talk more. I know we don't have time, but I couldn't believe in this theory anymore and what Dr. Graen has done over his 5 decades of his research.
Yeah, no, I am with you. It is remarkable the thought change of pursue success and hope the people that I've hired can get us there, and flipping that to see, know, care, support, and love the people that I've hired and watch what happens to the business. Mike, you were involved. You mentioned it earlier. We spent 10 years or so on the same team. I would love for you to talk about that dichotomy between, like, you were one of the OG, the original folks sent by P&G down to Northwest Arkansas for this experiment about partnering with the world's greatest or smallest or largest at the time retailer, and the team dynamic that developed, because I joined in 99. And one of the things I loved about this team was the dynamic of leadership focus, relationships matter. We're all in this together. And then you went to Walmart that has 1 million associates. They're over 1 million now, I think. Yeah. Different dynamics. Leadership is still important, both places. Tell us about the differences you've experienced, and not differences meaning one's good, one's bad. This company did this. I'm talking about the dynamics between small, wiry, hard charging teams, and then really large, complex structures.
Yeah, what's ironic about that, Steve, is my introduction to leadership actually happened even before I went to the Walmart team. So my examples and things that I built my foundation, I pride myself on learning the academics in college, which is great. But what I tried to do is everybody that I worked for, I tried to emulate the things that I thought were powerful and good and try and absolutely avoid the ones that I felt were negative. My first experience, I was with P&G for a couple of years, and they moved me from a project role to managing the Procter & Gamble data center. It had like 150 people that were mounting tapes and pushing buttons and monitoring stuff. And this is one of the biggest CPG companies in the world, and we're responsible to make sure the computers are up and running. So my first act, obviously, I've got to set a precedent. So I pull all 75 people together on the team. And I feel like I give this rah speech about how important we are and how integral we are to the business, et cetera. Well, of those 75 people, 4 of them actually report directly to me. The rest of them reported up through them. And I'm reading the audience when I'm seeing this, and all the people in the back are like, yeah, this is great new guy. And there's 4 people in the front. Those are my direct reports, and they're all standing like this with their arms folded. And after the meeting, I dismissed everybody. I said, hey, my direct reports, can we stick around? And I said, look, you didn't say anything, number one, but number two, the body language says I'm not tracking with you.
You said a lot without saying anything.
Yeah. And I looked at him, I said, what's going on? What are you thinking? They go, Mike, you are like every one of the, I've been around for 25, 30 years. You are like everybody else who comes in here and tries to rah us and get us out motivated, et cetera, et cetera. You'll be here for 18 months to 2 years. You'll be gone. We'll be going through the same thing next time. And I go, point taken. Thank you. I said, here's what I'm going to do. Before I make any decision about anything, I'm going to check with each one of you and get your input. That doesn't mean I'll necessarily do it, but I will listen to you because you've been doing this for years and years and years. And yeah, I'm the new kid on the block. So I developed that relationship with them right up front, completely turned around from my perspective, their thoughts of me. So, because they knew I had their back, right? No. They knew I was going to represent their point of view, et cetera. And I took that with me, and it was an amazing relationship, wonderful, et cetera. And it was really exciting. And when I went to the Walmart team, it was the same thing. Hey, I'm not the expert. I'm just the guy who's on the point. You guys are going to figure out how we're going to make this work, and I want to hear from you. So big part of what I tried to do is really listen to them, and not so I could listen so I can debate, but instead listen to really take their input in. Because if they all think the way I do, then some of us aren't needed, right? And there's an old leadership adage, I don't know what you know until I know that you care. That to me is critically important. They knew I cared about them. They knew I wasn't going to make every decision they recommended. I knew I cared. And frankly, Steve, what's interesting as I talk through this, and I'll wrap this up, Your big focus has always been people, but it's really been about culture. And I believe the relationship between the leader and their direct reports really sets the stage for what culture you want. If it's this, that's the culture you're going to have. If it's collaborative and no, I don't agree with everything you say, we shouldn't agree with everything we say, but we should, once we make a decision, we move forward. I think that sets a positive culture for the organization.
Mike, I really appreciate you bringing that up. As I was preparing for today, I've had the opportunity over the last probably 8 or 9 months to speak with a couple of different organizations, a couple of leadership teams and a couple of organizations. And as I've done my pre-work and as I've met with the leaders in the organizations, the one message that has come out and resonated in all three is something around the area of the line manager. Your direct manager is the most impactful signal to how a direct report experiences the total company culture. You can have all the greatest benefits in the world. You can have chili cook-offs in the office. You can have a kegerator in the afternoons, whatever. But it's that time it's that direct manager that understands what you're working on, can help you coach. It's how they experience you as their manager living out the culture. That is the single biggest determinant of how that direct report experiences the culture. It's that one-on-one manager. I would have not said that 4 years ago. I would have said mission, vision, values, the DNA of the organization. It flows down to, the way we celebrate as a team, the way we do compensation strategy, the way we do performance management. And then at the very bottom, it's then how your manager actually works on your development plan and helps you grow. I believe the thing is just flipped. And it is how you interact with your direct manager makes all the difference in the world, positive or negative, in how you get to experience the culture of that place.
Well, I think we ought to transition kind of to the LMX theory, but I will tell you one thing, Dad, you probably don't remember this. Years ago, I was going through some really tough things trying to figure out my team, et cetera. And it wasn't in my group, it was in a different group, but we were having a lot of turnover, people leaving and leaving the company. And you looked at me one day and said, son, people don't leave companies. People leave people. And I go, unpack that for me. I don't understand. He says, if you're not treated and you don't feel like you're respected and you're not have a voice heard and you're not valued, et cetera, you're not leaving, I'll make it up, Procter & Gamble. You're leaving you're the person you're reporting to, because I don't see a way out. I'm leaving to go somewhere else. So people don't leave companies, they leave people. And with the amount of turnover in organizations and the rehiring, et cetera, that's a shame to lose somebody because they don't think they're valued. It's not until you give the resignation notice until you go, no, I love you. I think you're awesome. You're wonderful. Well, you couldn't tell.
That would have been great to know a year ago, 6 months ago, a week ago, this morning. Yeah. Dr. Graen, it has been mentioned a few times, this LMX theory or this LMX framework, leader-member exchange. I know you've spent, 60 of your 70 years studying this model. Why don't you give us a quick definition or a quick explanation for what is this LMX theory?
Well, first of all, if you look at what Mike was just talking about, that the entry package of salary and benefits and all that gets you into the organization and will keep you there. But what really keeps you in the organization and creating things is the leadership relationship. If you come in and you have these people who put you down and have to initiate you as new people and all of that, there's no respect in that, and there's no leadership. They haven't been treated that in college. Nobody does that to them. But when they get to the organization, their supervisor treats them like that. Oh yeah, you're new to our team. We're going to have to initiate you and all of that kind of stuff, as though you're in a fraternity nonsense thing where the rich kids play games, but they don't join organizations. They live off their parents. And But the real thing is to find a person like Mike discovered, that someone who understood leadership relationships. And it's not only that you leave those people who don't have it, you don't leave those people who do have it and who lets you do what you want to do as a part. You have to have a purpose, and that your purpose is to make a difference in the team. And your leader has to cooperate, has to collaborate, or that's not going to happen. If you tell all sort of secrets out of class, you're not going to be accepted by any sort of leadership relationship. It doesn't happen. And LMX says this is how we do it. We identify people who have the mindset of collaboration with their superiors and with their people, and put them together. And they work on the relationship, the leadership relationship, and we teach them how to do that. And they go way beyond any sort of economics. The amount of pay is not relevant at all. It's that we're working together for something that you can't buy. And that's leadership.
Yeah. The X in leader member exchange, I want to just clarify, it's an exchange, right? It's a two-way exchange between the leader.
The question is, what is exchanged? And it's not economics. It's not money or things you can buy. It's actually love, as you talk about it. That I believe that you're going to be loyal to me and you're going to be dependable and keep your word. And I'm going to do the same. And we feel that way about each other. So this is a leadership condition. And if you don't have it, it's not going to happen. I mean, you can't lie about these sorts of things. You have to believe in your heart. It's a matter of faith. And if you don't like it, and economics people say it doesn't exist, they're wrong. It's psychological, and this is one of the greatest abilities of people. That's why we survive as being so weak and vulnerable to our environments. We can get together and have leadership. I want Steve to be the leader of our hunting group. I want Mike to be the leader of our gathering group. I want Navy Bob to be the leader of our Navy. and they work with their people and develop leadership relationships. And that's the magic that we teach people in college, that's what you're supposed to be. That's what you're supposed to do. They get into the organization. Yeah, we're going to give that to you. 2 years later, doesn't happen. So they're out of here.
Bob, you were very passionate and animated when you talked about what LMX did for your leadership, when you discovered it and what you've done with it. Can you give us a couple of like real nuts and bolts, concrete examples of how LMX, you bringing LMX to your relationships has played out?
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. And so just to add on to what Dr. Graen said, is that I was following this relationship-based leadership unknowingly when I was in command of the submarine. And when I started my dissertation at Rollins College, Dr. Marshall, who was my chair, along with Dr. Lockery, a part of the leadership course, they introduced me to LMX. I didn't know what LMX was. I started really digging into the leadership theories of, servant leadership, transactional, transformational. And when I came across this relationship, right? So servant leader measures what you're doing for the servant. Transactional leadership is how are you as a leader. But this is a unique leadership theory that really looks at the relationship strength between you and another person. And there's been overwhelmingly research that I never had access to this before that it was just a good old boy. I thought I was doing the right thing. But now getting into the world of scholarly research, it has really shown me that this really does work. If you improve the relationships with your subordinates or direct reports, success will go up. And that's exactly what happened to me in command. And so, again, this is a relationship theory that has not been, it's measuring the relationship, not the individuals. And what we found is that it doesn't matter what type of leader you are. It matters mostly on what types of relationships you build in your organizations. And just to add on to this, it has to stop from the top, right? That frontline leader will never develop those relationships, or it'll be by chance if the CEO doesn't permeate that down. And so you as a CEO at the top really need to set the example on how you care and love your subordinates. And I can go in and tell story after story. And Dr. Graen's LMX7, which is his survey, is his validated survey questions. And one of the questions in there is, would you have the back of your subordinate at the cost of your own, right? And what that does measure is how much do you love that individual? It's like a mom who sees their child, accidentally fall into a river. Would that mom jump in? Without a doubt. Does she love that child? Absolutely. Did she have that child's back at the cost of her own? Absolutely. You as a leader, if a person makes a mistake, are you there to protect them, or are you there to try to get them in trouble or use them as a scapegoat? That is one of the most powerful surveys to measure the relationship of love and caring. And if you follow this, just like Mr. Rogers said, success will follow. And it's just a recipe that is just explained in the scholarly world that really can work for any organization. And so I get plenty of examples that I reflect back and how I had the back of my subordinates. And in turn, when it came time to have their back or my back at the cost of their own, they were there. And that was because of the strengthened relationship we had on that submarine.
Yeah, man. And I think about, when you talk about cost you your own, I mean, you were, that wasn't hyperbole, like it would be in my office, probably on a ship. You're talking about that in real life.
Yeah. Steve, if I could, I can't speak of it right now. I have a separate book coming out about this, about my experiences of leadership. And I thought we were county detected, and this is with the DOD. I won't share until this book comes out, but there was no doubt that the success of the submarine, of being on the front page of USA Today, getting called, or, the president getting informed of why we got counter detected, was prevented because of the relationship that I built, that people had the courage to speak up under unbelievable odds that thought we shouldn't have been what we were doing. If I didn't have that relationship, there's no doubt we wouldn't have been the best submarine in the fleet. We would have been the laughing stock of the Navy. And I owe it to Dr. Graen's leader-member exchange theory that really explains why is it that we were so successful. There's no doubt in my mind it was because of the relationships that we built.
Man, that's amazing. We have a couple of questions that I would love to get to, and I'm going to go in reverse order that they came in, because the second one I think can play out here directly. And then just heads up to the group. The first question relates to artificial intelligence and the impact that can have on a leader-member relationship. So heads up on that one. The second one is this. We've talked a couple of times on this discussion that, hey, compensation is great, benefits are great, but really at the end of the day, it's about the quality of the relationship, and the money doesn't matter. And I guess the question from the group is, in theory, that sounds wonderful, but there are scenarios where comp and benefits aren't great, but manager relationship is strong. That doesn't mean that person's going to just grit it out and stay. And so can we talk about how that plays out? I mean, I guess there's probably a tipping point that says there's a gap that is maintainable with an ultra high LMX health, but there's a tipping point to where when the actual benefits of working in that organization and the trade-off of going somewhere else is just too great. Curious how you guys think about that trade-off.
So maybe restate the question for me, Steve. So when LMX is really, 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 really high, but I'm making minimum wage and I've got a family of 5 to feed, how do I balance that?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, basically, the question is, we all, in one way or another on this call, has said, hey, compensation doesn't really matter if you've got a really great relationship and there's strong trust and I've got your back and you've got mine. And I guess this person's poking at really like all the way down to your example, Mike, where, hey, I'm making $7.25 an hour and I've got an amazing relationship with my manager, but I'm just not, I can go work for $15 an hour at Chick-fil-A across the street, where I may or may not have a great relationship with my manager, even though I know I have one now. There's a tipping point there. Dr. Graen, you've got your hand up, I hope.
Well, a good example of that is when I joined the University of Illinois psych department. We had a department head who was the epitome of leadership. And what he would do, and everyone knew it, he would protect them, that all of the nonsense that comes down from above the university, he would shield them from it. And they wouldn't have to get involved in all of this nonsense and all of these purposeless meetings and things like that. And he had people there who could double their income very easily by moving to another university, but they wouldn't go until he retired. He dropped out. The department head, someone new came in, and they all left for better reasons. But it's that relationship they had with the department head that kept them there. And they knew when they were well off. They didn't want to go over the fence into the grass was greener, but no, I don't want to go over there because it's full of cow dung. And nobody knew it. And Mike has a good example of that too. That the grass on the other side can be wonderful until you get over there and you're stepping these cow pies.
I will tell you, I did not have cow dung or cow pies on my bingo card for today. So, Dr. Graen, thank you for that that opportunity to smile.
That's the G version. I think Dr. Bob has a response as well.
Yeah.
I thought a lot about that question, and a great question. And so McKinsey did a study during the Great Resignation, and they asked, why are people leaving? And the number one reason by far is not feeling valued, right? And by far, it was the compensation. Compensation is important. And through the HR processes, you get scaled on how much you should be paid based on your proficiency and so forth. But I will tell you that, if you are a good leader and you do care and you're authentic, you're transparent, you're going to pay the person for what they're worth. And it's not, they're not loving you or caring for you if they're paying you minimum wage and you're producing so much more. And so it's kind of a self-writing portion or, process that, a person that's providing so much more, they're going to give you benefits and professional development, teaching you and so forth. And so I haven't seen that. But what I have seen is the companies that all they worried about the bottom line, they're going to go across the street and they're going to go to somewhere else at a lower paying job because they're feeling valued. And this generation is all about feeling valued. Like when we were growing up, our parents were happy to have a job, transactional job, right? They were just happy to put food on the table. This generation, money is not the answer. It is important, but the really answer is how are you providing an environment or culture where you're loving and caring and making the subordinates feel valued.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think you're spot on.
My impression, it's a balance. Okay, if I am absolutely valued by my boss, great relationship, and I'm making minimum wage and I can't provide for my family, I'm going somewhere else. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. There's not a single factor. If you triple my salary, but I'm absolutely miserable, I'm probably not staying either. So again, not to oversimplify, but I think I mentioned before, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. That's the bottom line. If they don't trust you, to your point, Dr. Bob, if valued, if they don't feel valued and I feel like they have a role, et cetera, that to me is one of those intangibles that goes, yeah, I'm making pretty good money here, but I can do just as good over here, maybe even a little less, and be much happier at what I do. And that's how we mentor people, by the way, which is, you're only going to spend so many days at work. You better love what you do and get up every morning. And if you don't, go find something you absolutely love to do and get somebody to pay for it.
And you know what, Mike, that is that is how I articulate what I'm here to do. Whether I'm here with Island Ventures and CCF or helping people through this, is we all deserve to love our job. We all deserve to love our job. And hopefully we can build up leaders that can lead well, that can also play into that equation. It's interesting. You mentioned the Great Resignation, Dr. Bob. There's tons of studies out there about post-COVID or new realities of the workplace. One that I have been fascinated by is this question around return to the office, and organizations are being called back. And there's been study after study, and as best I can tell, looking across the different studies, there is a bit of a tipping point where people that have had flexibility that then lose that flexibility, like the company decides to bring everybody back. Either they had some flexibility and they lose all of it, or they were ultimately flexible and lose any of it. The data suggests that those people consider going to other roles when the tipping point is about a 5 to 7% comp difference. Said another way, the people that have left because they lost flexibility that they used to have, they've taken jobs that had salaries that happened to be 5 to 7% lower. Can't make a direct comparison because I'm not a statistician that it's 5 to 7%, but I'm curious what that tipping point would be with LMX implementation or LMX health, that, hey, at some point it's just not worth sticking around. The compensation is just not enough of a difference. Dr. Graen.
Well, the data show that not only individuals who have this latitude of working at home and having no direct leadership telling them what they can't do, entire teams of people leave and go together to an organization where they have that. And so what you're doing for a lot of people is saying, you've got the greatest job in the world, and we're going to change that, and you're going to come into the old thing that you hated. And so I said, wait a minute, I got to go to a place where I can start over. And the money is just going to be there because it takes some money to move, and they do. And so
yeah. It's interesting. The
people say, I'm in charge and I'm going to move all you guys, if you like it or not. If you don't, you're out of here. And that is disaster.
Yeah. If you look at the headlines today, Microsoft picked up an entire team that became available from OpenAI because I don't want to go too big of a stretch here, but the board leadership relationship, the exchange between board and leaders was not healthy. I'm sure there's lots of other things involved, but whole teams of people, whole company of people up and said, nope. Hey, I want to get this one question. George has been very, very patient for us to get to his question. So speaking of AI, and Mike, I'm going to go to you first because of all of the people on the call, you probably have the most technology direct experience of all of us from dev teams and otherwise. This wave of AI that is here, it's approaching every part of our lives. How do you suppose that will impact or permeate the leader direct report relationship? This is a stunner for me. I have not thought about it like this.
Well, I didn't think we were going to pass this question to me, but I'll go ahead and take it. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, computer vision, there's 1,000 acronyms out there, but here's what I would tell you, okay? Those, if used appropriately, they can be misused, but if used appropriately, automate tasks that otherwise people had to fulfill. And most of them are non-valued. There's things you got to do. There's audits you got to do. There's data you got to collect. There's research you got to do, et cetera. AI can be leveraged for good, which is to automate that process that people don't want to. Because really what you want to do is take the results of that and go, okay, Navy Bob, what are we going to do about it? Here's what the research says. This is what we say about it. So from my perspective, it actually helps, because even though we all ought to love our job, there's a certain percentage of the tasks that we have to do that we absolutely hate, whether it's writing up reports or doing stuff that you just don't want to do. So AI can be, if used for good, can be used for that kind of capability. People think it's this big mysterious thing, but it's basically just computers following human logic and developing a solution or results based upon previous experiences, et cetera. It can be used for a good thing, because guess what? Do I want to sit behind a keyboard and do another report? Or do I want to sit with Dr. Navy Bob and go, hey, this is what the report says. Now, what are we going to do about it? Because that, to me, is the more fun part of the job. So from my perspective, it's a good thing.
I love it. I love it. Hey, I'm gonna go ahead and send us out, but I do want folks that have enjoyed this conversation to go check out The Intelligent Startup. You can find it on Amazon. It is a great read that really brings to life the LMX theory. I loved reading it. I read it last week. It walks through a couple of different theory approaches and then lands on this one. I thought it was a great read, and so I would encourage folks to go pick it up if they want to hear more or experience more of Dr. Graen's immense wisdom on the topic. I would encourage you to go check it out. Hey, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We got to the questions that were sent in during the call. Thanks you guys for participating in the call, in the conversation here on leadership and culture, part of the Conversations on Retail family. And I appreciate it if you would go check them out as well if you're in the retail world and looking for things around technology that drives that retail world. My friend Mike Graen has a series of conversations on those topics. So thanks for joining us. Take care, everybody. And hey, let's go out there and make our relationships with our direct reports matter, really, really matter for the people, and make sure that we can love them in the way that they deserve, because everybody deserves to love their job. Awesome. Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you, Steve.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.